I used to be the all-powerful heir of the elite financial circle. I casually saved a Mafia princess who was being hunted down by her family. I hid her in my private villa, personally applying her medicine and teaching her political strategy. As she lay in my arms, she stroked my Adam's apple with blood-stained fingers. Her voice was raspy and seductive as she whispered, "Young master, once I take back everything, my life and my body will belong completely to you." Later, my family's empire collapsed overnight, and I became a stray dog that everyone wanted to kick. To stay alive, I fled to a small border town and started running a barbecue stall. When we met again, she had become the incredibly powerful queen of the Golden Triangle. Surrounded by a crowd of heavily armed mercenaries, she walked into my greasy barbecue stall. Terrified, I buried my face in the thick smoke, fearful that she would recognize me. But she walked straight up to me, tilted my chin up with the barrel of her gun, and breathed hotly against my ear. "Boss, have you had your fun yet? If you don't come home with me right now, believe it or not, I'll level this entire place, and then tie you up and lock you to my bed. Boss, 10 skewers of pork kidneys, extra spicy." A loud, greasy shout snapped me out of my brief daze. I gave a quick shout of acknowledgement, skillfully grabbed a handful of skewers, and tossed them onto the charcoal fire. The cumin and chili powder burst into a rich aroma under the intense heat, mixing with the greasy smoke and blasting right into my face. "My name is Ethan. I used to be the crown prince everyone fawned over in the elite financial circle. Now, I'm just the owner of this barbecue stall in a small border town. A greasy, middle-aged man scraping by selling skewers. Even though I'm only 27, it's been 5 years. I thought I would rot away in the mud like this for the rest of my life, until the screeching of brakes shattered the hustle and bustle of the night market. A dozen top-tier luxury black cars, like a pack of silent, giant beasts, surrounded my tiny little barbecue stall, so tightly that not a drop of water could leak out. The customers were so frightened they went dead silent, poking their heads out to watch with a mix of curiosity and fear. The car doors swung open in perfect unison, and dozens of burly men in black suits and sunglasses stepped out, holding gleaming guns openly in their hands. With an aura of absolute oppression, they swiftly cleared out. The entire street, the customers who had just been shouting orders at me, ran away, scrambling and crawling over each other. Tables were overturned, and beer bottles shattered all over the ground. I froze on the spot, still clutching a handful of uncooked meat skewers in my hand, my heart pounding so violently in my chest that it felt like it would burst out of my throat. She actually came after all. My instinct was to hide, burying my face even deeper into the choking, thick smoke, hoping it would serve as my camouflage. But those custom-made black high heels still stopped with absolute precision. On the greasy ground right in front of me, the tips of her shoes were polished to a brilliant shine, looking completely out of place in this filthy mess. I didn't dare to look up, able to catch only the familiar, cold and sharp scent of her perfume, forcing its way aggressively into my nose, instantly overpowering all the greasy smoke and the smell of cumin. It was her favorite, Rose of No Man's Land. "Boss," she spoke, her voice cold, sharp, and carrying a faint, barely there smile that made my entire body shudder. I pretended I hadn't heard her, flipping the meat skewers in my hand even faster. A drop of hot oil splattered onto the back of my hand, burning with an agonizing sting. "Business seems good," she said again. A hand clad in a black leather glove reached over, snatched the skewers from my grip, and carelessly tossed them onto the ground. Then, a piece of cold, hard metal pressed against my chin, forcing me to lift my head. It was a gun barrel. I finally saw her clearly. Her face was just as stunningly beautiful as ever, but the innocence and youth from 5 years ago had completely vanished, leaving only a cold, regal aura of a queen who looked down on everyone. She looked down at me, scrutinizing me, as if she were staring at a rat in a gutter. In those beautiful eyes of hers, a thick, intense possessiveness swirled, one that I couldn't quite fathom. "Ethan," she called my name, forcing out every single syllable as if squeezing them through her teeth. "We haven't seen each other in 5 years, and look at how you've turned yourself into this wretched mess." I parted my lips to speak, but my throat was so dry that no sound came out. A wave of intense shame washed over me, completely submerging me. The cheap t-shirt I wore was completely covered in grease stains, and my hands were riddled with countless burns and calluses, my entire body radiating a heavy, inescapable smell of kitchen smoke. Meanwhile, she was glamorous, radiant, and absolutely arrogant. An insurmountable chasm loomed wide open between us. She lightly traced her gun barrel along my jawline, stroke by stroke, her movements both intimate and incredibly dangerous. "Have you had your fun yet? If you don't come home with me right now, believe it or not, I'll level this entire place, and then tie you up and lock you to my bed." Her words caused my face to instantly flush crimson, a mix of burning humiliation and raw embarrassment. Around us, her heavily armed bodyguards watched everything unfold with entirely blank expressions. I felt exactly like a clown who had been stripped completely naked in public. "Scarlet," I forced her name past my lips with great difficulty. "Just let me go, please." She looked as if she had just heard the most ridiculous joke in the world, and let out a low, soft laugh. "Let you go?" She pulled back her gun, but in the very next second, she suddenly lunged forward, roughly grabbing me by the back of my neck. "When you saved me 5 years ago, why didn't you think about letting me go then?" Before I could answer, she shoved me forward with a sudden thrust, and commanded the bodyguards beside her, "Take him." The 2 bodyguards stepped forward immediately, flanking me on both sides and hoisting me up like a helpless chick. I thrashed against their grit for a brief second, but they pinned me down so tightly that I couldn't move an inch. And just like that, I was thrown into the back of a Rolls-Royce in the most humiliating manner imaginable. The door of the Phantom slammed shut, cutting off the entire outside world. The interior of the car was scented with expensive agarwood, which clashed violently, with the heavy stench of grease and smoke clinging to my clothes. Scarlet sat directly across from me, elegantly crossing her legs, as she stared at me coldly. A deathly silence filled the car. I stared down at my hands, which were entirely covered in thick calluses and painful burn scars. Ashamed and deeply self-conscious, I tried to hide my hands inside my sleeves, but she suddenly leaned forward, reaching out to place her hand over the back of mine. Her hand felt incredibly cold, her skin impossibly smooth. As if I had just been badly burned, I jerked my hand away violently. Scarlet's movements froze instantly. She lifted her head and stared unblinkingly at me, causing the temperature inside the car to seemingly plummet to a freezing point. The car finally pulled up right outside the grand entrance of the most luxurious hotel in the entire city. Escorted by the 2 bodyguards, I was escorted straight up into the penthouse presidential suite. The heavy doors shut tightly behind me, leaving the 2 bodyguards stationed outside like fierce guardian deities. Scarlet removed her tailored blazer, revealing the delicate silk camisole underneath. She sank lazily back into the plush sofa, pouring herself a glass of rich red wine. Then, examining me exactly as if inspecting a piece of property, she looked at me and said, "Go wash yourself clean." She spoke in a sharp, commanding tone, as a brand-new silk bathrobe was tossed right at my feet. Standing right in front of the massive floor-to-ceiling mirror, I stared at the utterly dejected, pathetic, and thoroughly humiliated man looking back at me. It was me, and yet it didn't look like me at all. I had honestly believed that all of my pride had long since been ground down completely by 5 years of scraping by at the very bottom of society. But at this very moment, I finally realized that it had only been buried deep down in the absolute depths of my heart, and Scarlet was digging it back out in the cruelest way possible, viciously trampling it under her feet. It took me a very long time to finish washing up. With every layer of grime I scrubbed off, it felt as though I were peeling away a layer of the camouflage I relied on to survive. When I walked out wearing that completely out-of-place silk bathrobe, Scarlet was standing by the window, holding a wine glass. Hearing the noise, she turned around and walked toward me step by step, her high heels pressed into the carpet, without making a sound, yet each step felt like it was pounding directly on my heart. She came to a stop right in front of me, the crimson wine swirling in her glass, reflecting the dark, unreadable light in her eyes. She reached out with her other hand, resting her icy fingertips against my chest. "It's been 5 years, Ethan." Her voice was very soft, carrying a faint sigh. "Your spine is still just as stiff as ever." My body froze like a block of stone. I didn't dare move, nor did I dare breathe. I didn't know what she was going to do next. Repay a kindness, or seek revenge. Or maybe she just wanted to see her former savior, in his current pathetic state, to satisfy her own twisted pleasure. Scarlet's fingers slid all the way down my chest, stopping right at my abdomen. There was an old scar there, left behind 5 years ago when I covered her escape. "Does it still hurt?" No emotion could be heard in her voice. I didn't answer, but the rigidity of my body gave everything away. She withdrew her hand, turned around and pulled a card out from the coffee table drawer. She slapped it onto the table. It was a black card, the kind with no credit limit. "The pin is your birthday." She looked at me, her tone as casual as if she were commenting on the nice weather today. "Forget about that pathetic stall of yours. Follow me from now on." The blood instantly rushed to my head. Humiliation, anger, and an indescribable trace of disappointment exploded within my chest. I thought she would at least ask me how I had been doing these past 5 years. But I had forgotten. We were no longer from the same world. In her eyes, my current destitution could probably be easily solved with money. Is Her Majesty the Queen paying back a debt of gratitude? I let out a cold laugh, my voice incredibly raspy. Or is she just keeping a dog? Slap. Her expression changed instantly, and she whipped a fierce backhand across my face. The force was so great that it snapped my head to the side, and I immediately tasted the metallic tang of blood at the corner of my mouth. Ethan! Her voice was filled with suppressed rage, as she grabbed my wrist, squeezing with so much force it felt like she would crush my bones. Don't throw my generosity back in my face. The sharp pain cleared my head a bit. I forcefully shook off her hand and turned around, wanting to leave. Do you really think you can still walk away? Her icy voice echoed from behind me, and the 2 bodyguards instantly blocked the exit at the door. She wrapped her soft body tightly around me from behind, pressing against my rigid back, yet her voice remained utterly devoid of warmth. 5 years ago, you hid me away in your villa, and wouldn't let me step a single foot outside. Now, it's my turn. I felt a wave of suffocation, not from her embrace, but from the despair of being completely controlled and stripped of all my freedom. I don't need your charity, I said, emphasizing every single word. Each syllable sounded like it had been dragged out of an ice cellar. Let me go. Charity? She let out a low laugh against my ear, a laugh tainted with a wounded, angry shadow. I am simply taking back what belongs to me. She violently spun me around, forcing me to face her. Her bloodshot eyes flashed with a mad, obsessive paranoia. Have you forgotten what you said to me? You said my life belonged to you. Now that I'm back, I am going to take your body, your heart, and everything you have back. Looking at her near manic state, my heart throbbed with a sharp ache. How did we end up like this? Was the girl who once trembled in my arms, promising to give me her life, and the queen standing before me now, using money and power to humiliate me? Were they truly the exact same person? Scarlet, I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to sound as calm as possible. 5 years is long enough to change a lot of things. I am no longer the Ethan from back then, and you are no longer the you from back then either. We are even. Even? She chewed on those words, the fury on her face gradually fading away. In its place came a bone-chilling coldness. You think we're even just because you say so? I didn't want to argue with her anymore. I violently tore open the collar of my bathrobe, revealing the hideous scar across my chest. The scar ran all the way from my left shoulder down to my abdomen, like a grotesque centipede sprawling across my skin. Is this? I pointed at the scar, and locked eyes with her, enough to pay you back for your life? Scarlet's pupils contracted violently. She stared dead at the scar, as if trying to look right through it. Every single expression on her face, the dominance, the anger, and the paranoia vanished in an instant, leaving behind nothing but utter helplessness and agony. This was the first time she had broken her facade in front of me. She reached out, her fingertips trembling as she tried to touch the scar, yet she didn't dare to make contact. Is that from back then? Even her voice was shaking. I pulled my collar back together, hiding that hideous mark, along with the absolute last shred of my dignity. Yes. I closed my eyes, not wanting to look at her anymore. So, we owe each other nothing. The room fell into a deathly, suffocating silence. I could hear her rapid, suppressed breathing. A long time passed. So long that I thought she was finally going to give up. Suddenly, she spoke. It's not enough. Her voice was very soft, yet it carried an absolute, unquestionable determination. It's nowhere near enough. How could a single scar be enough? To pay me back for my life? Ethan, what you owe me can never be paid off in this lifetime. I snapped my eyes open and looked at her in sheer disbelief. What on earth did she want from me? The pain in her eyes had completely vanished. In its place was a deeper, terrifying obsession that sent a shiver down my spine. She seemed to have severely misunderstood something. Ding-dong, the sound of the doorbell shattered the suffocating standoff in the room. Scarlet instantly regained her regal, queenly composure. She shot me a cold glance. Stay here and don't move. She walked over to open the door. A man was standing outside. He was immaculately dressed in a suit, looking thoroughly sophisticated and refined, holding an elegant insulated food container in his hand. Scarlet, I had the hotel kitchen prepare some late-night soup for you. The man's voice was gentle, his eyes filled with an obvious, deep adoration. Then his gaze bypassed Scarlet and landed squarely on me. When he saw me standing there in a silk bathrobe, with water still dripping from my hair, the smile on his face froze instantly. His expression rapidly shifted from initial shock to completely unmasked contempt and hostility. "And who is this?" he asked Scarlett. Though his eyes cut into me like sharp knives, Scarlett stepped aside to let him in. "My guest?" Her tone was flat, completely devoid of any emotion. The man, who happened to be Wesley, was a rising star in the business world, and he was also one of Scarlett's most important business partners now. I had read all of this information in a cheap newspaper back in that small border town. Wesley placed the insulated food container on the table, and then walked straight toward me. He stopped right in front of me, looking me up and down, with a gaze that was scrutinizing a piece of merchandise. "Scarlett, is this the savior you've been looking for 5 years?" His tone was filled with utter contempt and mockery. "A mere cook from a barbecue stall?" He emphasized the word cook with particular weight. I clenched my fists so hard that my fingernails dug deeply into my palms. From the moment he walked in, I knew tonight wouldn't end well. The way this man looked at Scarlett was brimming with intense possessiveness, and I, an unidentified man who had suddenly appeared, had undoubtedly become a thorn in his side. "Wesley," Scarlett's voice turned ice cold, "watch your mouth." Yet, Wesley acted as if he hadn't heard Scarlett's warning. He even made an exaggerated gesture with his hand, fanning the air in front of me. "Stinks of grease and smoke. How cheap." He let out a soft laugh and leaned closer to me, speaking in a voice only the two of us could hear. "Kid, I don't care who you used to be. Right now, you're just a dog that Scarlett brought back. If you behave and do what you're told, you might get a scrap to eat. But if you don't know your place," before he could even finish his sentence, Scarlett suddenly rushed over and forcefully shoved him away. The massive force sent him staggering back several steps, nearly making him fall over. "What are you doing?" Wesley looked at Scarlett in sheer disbelief. Scarlett shielded me behind her back, like an infuriated lioness. "He is my guest. It is not your place to tell him what to do." Her voice was piercingly cold, carrying an unquestionable authority. Wesley's face turned incredibly ugly. He stared at Scarlett standing protectively in front of me, his eyes filled with jealousy and deep resentment. "You're turning on me for his sake? Is a worthless piece of trash really worth it? Whether he's trash or not, I know better than you do." Scarlett shot back without the slightest hesitation. "Now, take your late-night food and get the hell out." Wesley's face turned livid with rage. He pointed at Scarlett, unable to squeeze out a word for a long time. Ultimately, he still didn't dare to completely burn his bridges with Scarlett. He shot me a vicious glare instead. A look like a venomous snake coiled and ready to strike, as if he wanted to swallow me alive. "Fine. Very well," he said through gritted teeth. "Scarlett, you're going to regret this." With that, he slammed the door and stormed out. The thunderous sound of the slamming door echoed through the empty room. I looked at Scarlett's back, which was rising and falling slightly with anger, and my heart swirled with a complex mix of emotions. Was she defending me? Or was she just protecting her own property, refusing to let anyone else touch it? I didn't know. All I knew was that my presence had brought her trouble. "See?" I blurted out, a trace of self-mockery in my voice. "I will only bring you trouble." Scarlett turned around, the anger in her chest not yet subsided. She looked at me, her gaze complicated. "This isn't your fault, is it?" I curled the corner of my mouth. If I were still the Ethan from 5 years ago, would he ever dare speak to me like that? My words were like a thorn, stabbing deeply into Scarlett's heart, as well as into my own. Yeah, if I were still that all-powerful crown prince of the elite financial circle, who the hell would Wesley think he is? But right now, I was just a barbecue stall owner. A failure who couldn't even respect himself. Scarlett fell silent. The atmosphere in the room grew heavy and suffocating once more. I didn't want to stay here anymore, tolerating her pity while being humiliated by her suitor. "I'm leaving." I stated once again. "I already told you, you can't leave." Scarlett's attitude remained unyielding. "Why?" I practically screamed at her. "What on earth do you want to get from a broken man like me? If you want to repay a favor, I don't want your money. And I already gave my life back to you. What more do you want?" Looking at my sudden emotional breakdown, a flash of deep pain crossed Scarlett's eyes. She didn't answer my question. Instead, she turned around and pulled something out of her handbag. It was a piece of paper that had already yellowed, yet was meticulously folded. She unfolded the paper and held it out in front of me. The moment I saw that paper, my breath completely hitched. It was a life indenture contract. It was something I had jokingly, half coaxed and half tricked Scarlett into signing back then. Written on it in my own bold, sweeping handwriting was, Scarlett voluntarily surrenders the ownership of the rest of her life, fully and completely to Mr. Ethan. At the bottom was her crooked signature from back then, along with a bright red thumbprint. I thought she had thrown this useless piece of paper away a long time ago. I never expected that she would actually keep it, let alone keep it for 5 whole years. I stared at it, my throat completely dry, the corner of Scarlett's mouth curled into a dangerously seductive smile, one that carried a hint of playfulness and triumph. "You're the one who made me sign this 5 years ago. Now, I've come to exercise my ownership." She pointed to the words, Mr. Ethan, on the contract, and then pointed back at me. "Ethan, for the next month, you belong to me. Starting tomorrow, you are my special assistant." I froze on the spot. A special assistant? This was a contract I couldn't possibly reject, because it was something I had created with my own hands. But this was also the way out she was offering me, a reason to stay by her side, without completely shredding my remaining self-esteem. Looking at her completely confident smile, a whirlwind of conflicting emotions flooded my heart. Ultimately, I chose to accept it silently, because I knew I didn't have any room to choose to begin with. And deep down, in the absolute depths of my heart, it seemed I didn't truly want to leave either. Early the next morning, designers and stylists from a top-tier luxury brand knocked on the suite door, treating me like a priceless work of art. They measured my body for custom clothes and styled my hair. When I changed into a perfectly tailored haute couture suit and stood in front of the mirror, I could barely recognize myself. The man in the mirror stood tall and straight, his features sharp and striking, even though there was still a trace of exhaustion on his face. From living at the bottom of society for so long, the noble aura belonging to the crown prince of the financial circle had already returned by 70 or 80%. It felt as if those past 5 years of a miserable, pathetic life had been nothing more than a bad dream. "Not bad," Scarlett's voice rang out from behind me. She was wearing a sharp, professional white skirt suit, with her long hair elegantly pinned up, radiating an absolute, commanding presence. She walked a slow circle around me, and nodded with immense satisfaction. "This is the Ethan I know." In her eyes, there was an unmasked fixation and a profound pride. Being stared at like that made me a little uncomfortable, and I instinctively adjusted my tie. That evening, Scarlett took me out to attend a high-end business gala. She introduced me to everyone as her special assistant. This title was highly subtle. It gave me a legitimate position, yet it also carried an underlying, indescribable tension. The people at the gala were all either incredibly wealthy or highly powerful. The looks they gave me were filled with scrutiny and curiosity. I tried my best to maintain my composure, but 5 years of isolation from the world still made me feel a bit out of place. Like an outsider, I followed silently behind Scarlett. Then, we ran into Wesley again. He clearly hadn't expected me to appear in this kind of look, and a flash of jealousy and resentment crossed his eyes. He walked over, holding a wine glass. A hypocritical smile plastered across his face. "Oh, Assistant Ethan, you changed your skin, and I almost didn't recognize you." He deliberately put extra emphasis on the word assistant. Scarlett's face darkened, and just as she was about to speak, I shook my head at her. I couldn't keep hiding behind her forever. "You're joking, Mr. Wesley." I raised a glass of champagne slightly toward him and said, "Clothes make the man. I have Miss Scarlett to thank for this suit." My attitude was neither humble nor arrogant, forcing Wesley to swallow down the entire stomachful of mockery he had prepared. He wasn't willing to just let it go. It just so happened that at this moment, the host of the gala, a real estate tycoon, was discussing with several people a complex overseas investment project. Wesley's eyes darted around, and he suddenly said loudly, "Chairman Wong, let me introduce someone to you. This is the special assistant Miss Scarlett just hired, Mr. Ethan. Mr. Ethan is a top-tier graduate. Why don't we let him give you some pointers on this project?" Everyone's eyes instantly focused on me. Wesley was doing this to humiliate me in public. What could a barbecue stall owner possibly know about overseas investment? Everyone had an expression that showed they were waiting to see a joke. Chairman Wang also frowned, clearly feeling that Wesley was making a mountain out of a molehill. Scarlett's hands clenched tightly, the veins on the back of her hands bulging. But I remained very calm. I took